Verse 40 of the Tao says, it's all about returning. It's all about returning. Returning to what? Returning to the place from which you originated. The first 9 months of your life, you lived inside of your mother's womb in water. And during those whole 9 months, nobody could get in there and mess around with you. Nobody could get in there and get you to worry about anything. You didn't have sonograms that you'd look at and say, my God, I don't have a nose yet. What the hell's going on? I sure hope I get a nose. And you got into nose therapy and you worry about it. Oh, what if it doesn't happen? You don't do that. And all of a sudden, perfectly, it all unfolds in exactly the way it's going to unfold, independent of your opinion about it. You're not doing anything. Nothing is left undone. You're being done. You're being completed. And you were totally, completely at peace with it. You were surrendered to it. You allowed it. It wasn't a struggle. It wasn't. And then you popped out of there. And then you said, thank you, God. Thank you, Tao. Thank you, Source. We'll take over from here. And that was the biggest mistake. All of a sudden, you took over, and you edged God out. E-G-O. You edged God out. And you took on an ego, didn't you? And what is an ego? It's just an idea. Just an idea about who you are. Instead of being a piece of God, a piece of the Source, you decided, and those around you decided, that you were something different. And if you studied quantum physics, and you took the tiny little particle that began you, and you tried to find out where it came from and reduced it down to its tiniest subatomic properties, ultimately you would discover what Lao Tzu knew, that it's the spirit that gives life, that you didn't come from a particle, that particles do not create particles, particles do not come from particles. Originally, all particles come from an energy, a field of energy that has no beginnings and no ends and no boundaries. And that's who you are. And returning back to that, and letting go of the idea that who you are is what you have, and who you are is who you control. I don't think there's any more all-pervasive theme in the Tao Te Ching than the idea of being a non-interferer. Do you, Stephen? I mean, isn't it? It's about not interfering, isn't it? It's about letting go. It's about allowing. It's about detaching. And I watch, and I've become much more of an observer, even on airplanes. I was in London 5 days ago. And I don't know if you've flown in and out of Heathrow lately, but things have really changed. You know, we couldn't take anything on the plane. The terrorists, whoever they are selling fear, and we respond with more fear. Every time you use force, you create a counterforce, and then another counterforce, and before you know, and the Tao teaches us all. I mean, one of the great lessons in the Tao is that any country that has its primary resources and its energy placed on building weapons is not of the Tao. And those countries that have their consciousness located in the Tao put their energy into tractors and building homes and growing food, not building weapons. I saw a movie not too long ago with Nicolas Cage about warlords or something, the Lords of War, I think it was something like that. One of those alarming things about how much energy we are in the world creating, energy to destroy ourselves. That we have literally created from our consciousness enough weaponry on this planet to eliminate all life within just a few moments. It's all there. It's all there for us. We've allowed ourselves to move so far away from the great teachings of the great spiritual masters. And we believe that we're a Christian nation or that we're a spiritual nation when we find ourselves having moved away from these simple principles and then getting upset with other people because we can have these kind of weapons, but they can't, and we don't look hard enough at ourselves and all the ways that we have deflected ourselves from the greatest teachings of all of the great spiritual masters. That those who understand the way understand that we show up here from an invisible source, and our whole objective in being here is to return to it. It's a return trip. And constantly I call this the state of God realization. That it's within each and every one of us, if we decide that we're going to make this return trip and live a God-realized life. This idea of a God or a source or a spirit or an intelligence that is not something that is external to you, but that in fact is you, is the source of all of us. In the Tao they call this the world of the 10,000 things. And the 10,000 things is just the ultimate number to represent everything that is in the material world. So that everything that originates in the world of source, in the world of non-being, all being comes from that place. And it's something I'd like to suggest to you when I talk about you can't give away what you don't have. That whatever it is that you are giving away in the way of being offended or being an appreciator, and by the way, appreciation versus depreciation is the highest form of energy that you can have to your thoughts. In other words, every time you have a thought of depreciation, you have weakened yourself in some form. Any kind of a thought of depreciation. Whereas if you can shift a thought of depreciation into one of appreciation, even for that which you have been conditioned to believe deserves to be depreciated, if you can figure out a way to change and alter your thoughts, then you move into a higher energy. But more than moving into a stronger and a higher energy with appreciation, is that you move into a level of consciousness called synchronicity, in which you start to negotiate the presence of energy to serve as an attractor pattern. And that what I'm speaking about, solid energy as the lowest form of energy, and spiritual energy as the highest and the fastest form of energy, and that spiritual energy, the energy of love, the energy of cheerfulness, the energy of kindness, the energy of peace, when this energy is brought to the presence of the energy in which you have problems, lower energy, that these problems dissolve, they can't survive any more than darkness can survive in the face of light, then there is some kind of a gap that you have to negotiate between the world of problem energy and the world of higher energy. But what you have to look at here, when I say you can't give away what you don't have, is to ask yourself, if I can't give away what I don't have, it means that I am giving away what I do have. And because it's the only thing I can give away. I have to have it to give it away. So, and if energy is the vehicle upon which things are attracted and come into my life, then what is it that I am sending out there, because it is in giving that we receive, what is it that I'm giving? What am I sending out there? What kind of energy do I send out there? And begin to look at that as the rationale and the explanation and the reasoning behind what is showing up in your life. That it really has nothing to do with what's going on outside of you in other people and in other events and in what other people are saying or doing or circumstances of your life. As much as we like to use that as an explanation and a rationale for it, that in fact, if you can change around your thinking to ask yourself, why do I keep attracting what it is that I'm attracting into my life, and what can I do to attract something different into my life? These things that we're calling attractor energies, that possibly, just possibly, I might be able to come to a place where I recognize that everything that's going on in my life, everything, I take responsibility for. And if I continue to attract the wrong people, or scarcity instead of abundance, or illness instead of health, or unhappiness rather than happiness, or fear rather than faith. And again, I always go back to that very famous prayer of St. Francis, where there is doubt, let me bring faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. Where there is hatred, love. And if I can find a way to rid myself of those, just the thoughts, that I might possibly open myself up to a new idea, a mind that is open to everything, is one in which I say that I have been responsible for attracting all of these things into my life, and now I'm going to work at it for a given period of time of attracting something different into my life. I'm going to go with new attractor patterns of energy. I'm just going to go with it and see if I can make that shift begin to take place. And this thing that I have referred to as synchronicity is something that Jung said is something that is very real and is very powerful and is something that you can access. Which means that as you reach a faster energy yourself, you see, if everything is energy and nothing happens until something moves, and everything is moving, then you yourself are just a great big bundle of energy. You are just vibrating, and if you are a bundle of energy, if you buy this idea that your hand and your feet and your eyes and your entire body is really nothing more than a series of very, very tiny subatomic particles all moving together very fast with spaces between them, and you see that and you can get that, then you recognize that there's got to be a frequency at which you are vibrating. It's got to be vibrating at some frequency. And if you can also accept the idea that if I could move to a faster and a higher, more spiritual energy, that I will literally change the vibration at which I am vibrating, then it begins with the thoughts. It begins with how I am processing and thinking thoughts, that I can absolutely get to a place where I can start to radiate out different kinds of energy. If I had a woman from Holland who came over to see me, whose husband had left her after 25 years. She had 4 children, and she just had been on the verge of suicide. And she was losing weight, and she was depressed, and she was taking all kinds of drugs for it, and she was getting sicker and sicker because she just couldn't get over it. And she came to a book signing that I was doing at a bookstore down in Florida. And she said, "You've got to say something to me. You've got to say something to me that will help me to get over this." And I told her this line. I said, give up your personal history. Merge yourself here, now, into this moment. And those 25 years are something, if you want to understand how to do it, think of your past as, this hat. And this is your past. Now you can't just set this thing down over here and walk away from it and give up your personal history, because you'll always have it there to look back at. What you do is you pick up your past and you embrace it. You understand it, you accept it, as I had to go through these things that I had to go through in order for me to get to this place today, and the evidence for that is that I did. You don't need any more evidence. You did. And then you toss it. You toss it. You embrace it, and you toss it. And you merge into the now by giving up your attachment. And some of you have heard me use the metaphor of the wake. Alan Watts talked about the wake is not what drives the boat. The wake is just a trail that is left behind. That's all it is. And so is the wake of your life. And the wake doesn't make the boat go,
And neither does the wake of your life the reason why your life is going in the direction that it is. The wake is a trail that is left behind, and it's an illusion to believe that it is the cause of your suffering or your struggles or your difficulty. Give it up. Let it go. Embrace it, understand it, get help doing that if you must, and then move into the now. Wisdom is avoiding all thoughts which weaken you. You know, every thought has an energy, just like everything else in the universe. And if you have a thought of shame, it will weaken your muscles. And what is your heart but a muscle? If you raise a child who believe in shame and feel ashamed of themselves, every time they think that shameful thought, they will be weakened. And if you have a thought of fear, and if you have a thought of stress, and you have a thought of anguish and anxiety, all of these thoughts and many more are the thoughts that will always weaken you. When you are having a thought that you know is disempowering you, shift it. Shift it to one that is empowering rather than disempowering. And the thoughts that empower are thoughts of neutrality and willingness and love, and ultimately thoughts of divinity. And when you see a troubled person who is out there struggling at the highest level of unity consciousness or God consciousness, or spiritual consciousness, you recognize yourself in all that you see. There, but for the grace of God, go I. And I am connected to that person. Changing your thoughts. I appeared on the Tonight Show many years ago, several times, quite a few times. And I remember coming home from the Tonight Show, and I was walking along the beach, and they had taped the show the night before, and I was out for a walk, and a woman who lived in the Northeast stopped me, and she said, "Didn't I see you last night on the, how could you be here?" I said, "Well, I flew the red eye, and I was walking along." She said, "You know, we're moving down here." She said, "What are the people like here? What's it like?" And I said to her, I said, "Well, what are they like where you live?" She said, I live in a very big city. And she said, they're very pushy. And people are not very kind. And they don't have time for you. And she said, it's really not very pleasant. She said, that's one of the reasons I'm leaving there. I said, well, that's pretty much what you're going to find here. That's basically what the people are like here. On the way back on the same day, someone else who had seen me the night before on the Tonight Show, who had lived in the Midwest, stopped me and asked me almost the same question. She said, "You live here?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Well, my husband and I are moving here and we're looking for a school." She said, "What are the people like here? What's it like here?" I said, "What are they like in Chicago where you live?" She said, "It's the Midwest." She said, "People are very friendly, they're open, they open their homes to you, they're very loving, they're very kind." She said, "It's a wonderful place." She said, "I love that. I'm going to really miss that." I said, "That's pretty much what you're going to find here." It's what you expect. It's what you think about that expands. It's what Emerson taught us. The ancestor to every action is a thought. Change your thoughts, and you change your world. Change your expectations, and you change around what you begin to manifest and see showing up in your life. To change the thought from notice me, to what Lao Tzu calls living in obscurity, becoming more obscure. We live in a celebrity-obsessed world, don't we? Look at me. Notice me. The Tao teaches something completely the opposite. Listen to the 66th verse of the Tao. Water again. The sea stays low. And because the sea stays low, all of the rivers and all of the streams empty into it. Because it stays humble. Because it stays in that place of just allowing everything to come to you. He was trying to teach us the important lesson of letting what we know is coming come to us. Verse 66 of the Tao. Why is the sea king of 100 streams? Because it lies below them. Humility gives it its power. That's a very important principle to understand, and I live on the ocean, right next to it. It's my front yard. And always I watch it to learn something from this thing called the ocean, which is the most powerful source of life that we have on the planet. Without it, there's no life on this planet. And because it stays low, so what does this have to say to us? Do you have the capacity to get past that ego need to always be saying, notice me, look how important I am? I mean, there's been a proliferation of this lately with this celebrity silly stuff, isn't it? I mean, CNN is doing, full hour shows on silly little things about what happened to this particular celebrity or what happened to that celebrity, and the celebrity's never even done anything. And there's all of this talk about it. And all of the new magazines. I mean, and you go through an airport and you look on the newsstand and all the same photos, just with different magazines. I don't even know what the names of all of them are, but there's like this huge market now that we have for people to get into a state of notice me, notice me, notice me. And how much do we train our young people, particularly in our schools and so on, that the one who is the star is the one who gets the most attention. The one who is the most important and the most valuable is the one that has the most people liking them and so on. This constant obsession with needing to be noticed. When in fact, what I have found for myself is the happiest moments of my life are when I can do it low and slow and not have anybody out there even know what I'm doing. To be able to, I mean, Louise never would have advertised the fact of some of the things I talk about with her generosity. She does it anonymously. It's almost always done in those ways. No, look at me, look and notice me, how important I am and so on. So much to learn from that kind of wisdom, from that kind of inner connection to the Tao, the ability and the willingness to do it anonymously, to say that you can just get done almost anything that you want to get done if you don't become obsessed with taking credit for it. In the 36th verse of the Tao Te Ching, it says, "The gentle outlast the strong. The obscure outlast the obvious." Try to become a little more obscure, a little less interfering, a little less notice me, a little less, one of the specific kinds of things that you can do is just as you're about, when somebody else is talking, just as you're about to interject what you've been thinking about for the whole time, waiting for them to stop talking, just stop and to bite your tongue and say, tell me more. Or, that's very interesting. I have never heard that point of view before. Even if they totally, completely disagree with everything that you stand for, to be willing to listen, to be able to stop, practice it. I practiced it when I did these verses of the Tao. I practiced it every single day while I was working on that. Just staying obscure. And for me, that's not always so easy because of just being recognized wherever I go. And if I saw someone who was about to recognize me, I would just put my head down. I would just walk a little bit past them like something. Right now, I just want to be anonymous. Right now, I want to be obscure. The Tao says, storms always end. Verse 23, fierce winds don't blow all morning. A downpour of rain doesn't last all day. Who does this? Heaven and earth. You're already connected to everything you want or need. It will come to you at the exact perfect time, as the rivers and the streams come to the ocean at the perfect time and place. You gotta trust. You gotta know it's going to come to you. You don't have to chase after it. You can become a little less obsessed with your ego and your self-importance and who you are and what you've done, and you can get so much more done. And you know what? It's the most peaceful and sweet, delicious way. It's like the song that Cecilia was singing about the rose. Thank you so much, and God bless you. Thank you.
Here are a few ideas for putting peace in your life permanently. Thinking of yourself as a peaceful person is the first step, but it is only the first step. The thought must translate into action in order for you to know peace. Work at curbing your inclination to create confrontation and disruption in the lives of others. A simple practice of pausing and asking yourself whether your ego, which loves turmoil, or your higher self, which loves peace, is about to act. That pause will help you to send out a peaceful response even in situations where you are feeling impatient or misunderstood. In those situations, you will be able to state simply, for example, "You are really having a rough day," to a hassled clerk rather than, "I've been waiting for 15 minutes already and I'm really feeling abused." Send out peace by catching yourself and then consulting your loving presence for a response rather than relying on your ego. Practice releasing the emotions of fear and guilt and replacing them with love and forgiveness and kindness. Release the guilt by forgiving yourself and vowing to avoid that kind of conduct in the future. You do not need the guilt unless you're going to allow your ego to continue its dominance over your life forever. For example, make a list of all the things that keep you from loving yourself. Your list might include being overweight and jealous or nervous or addicted or incompetent or uncoordinated. Then, regardless of how much effort it takes, reverse your mental sentences and state that you love yourself while being fat, while being addicted, and so on. This will help you to feel peaceful about the choices you've made and to realize that you are not that body or those desires. You are the invisible chooser. As you become more peaceful with the chooser, you will begin to replace the unhealthy choice in a spirit of love. Examine everything that offends you and see if you can get your ego out of the picture. If hunger and starvation in the world offend you, try shifting to a new awareness. Somehow, in some way that I do not comprehend, these things occur in divine order, and so too does my desire to change it exist in divine order. Shed what offends you and act on your desire to make corrections. There will then be no need to fight. Similarly, if you find someone else's behavior offensive, you are interpreting that behavior from your own self-absorbed position, which is that they shouldn't act the way they do. You choose to be offended, hurt, or angry by their behavior. But they are acting the way they are. Your being offended is your ego talking to you to keep you anxious and upset. If you don't take it personally, and if you see the behavior for what it is, you can work to eradicate the evils of the world unimpeded by your ego's encouragement to be offended. Keep in mind that grievances bring turmoil, while communication brings peace. If you want peace in your life, rid yourself of your grievances. The way to shed these grievances is to let go of your own self-absorption and to practice forgiveness rather than revenge. As you let go, you will feel a sense of peace overtaking you. If you are angry towards someone in your life, no matter how difficult you may find it, work at communicating with that person about your aggrieved feelings. Your embarrassment or inner anguish over being wronged is just what your ego wants you to experience, since it will keep you away from your sacred quest and keep you in the clutches of your anxiety-loving ego. Keep this little sentence ready to consult. Judgment and peace are antithetical. A Course in Miracles says the strain of constant judgment is virtually intolerable. It is curious that an ability so debilitating would be so deeply cherished. You must make a daily effort to look upon others without condemnation. Every judgment takes you away from your goal of peace. Your ego loves your judgments because with them you remain in a constant state of anguish and remorse. Keep in mind that you do not define anyone with your judgment. You only define yourself as someone who needs to judge. Judging others with condemnation removes the possibility of your experiencing love. If you can practice just being still rather than condemning, you will get to the bliss I am talking about. You do not have to pretend that you love something that you loathe. Just get still and let the judgments subside. Peace is not found in being right or being hurt or being angry. By all means, work toward righting the wrongs you perceive, but do it with an understanding that an angry heart keeps you from knowing God on the path of your sacred quest. Peace will come to you when you are a healer rather than a judge. Essentially, embracing the truth is welcoming your higher self and coming to know God. All that is not authentic will drop away automatically. Your ego works hard to convince you that you are separate and better than everyone else, and you know that it does not take kindly to your embracing anything that threatens its existence. But remember that this is your inauthentic self, your false self. Deception is going to play a big role in your life when you embrace ego as your guide. Therefore, in order to abandon your reliance on that false self with all of its deception, you will have to make a new agreement with truth. I encourage you to actually write yourself a contract in which you agree to include truth as your companion in your thoughts, in your conversations, and in your life. This is a big challenge and perhaps difficult for you, but it is guaranteed to lead you to the path of your sacred self. Begin by looking honestly and fearlessly at who you are beneath all the surface trappings that you have surrounded yourself with. You have a human storyline, as does every person who has ever lived on this planet. That storyline begins with your conception, continues through your childhood, and all of your personal triumphs and tribulations, right up to this very moment. You know that there is an eternal aspect of you beneath the surface, and that for this part of you, only the truth will suffice.